Hello everyone and welcome to Metagame Mastery, coming to you today with the last day of Dominaria preview season. The full set has been revealed and most of today's cards are going to be commons, so we're going to talk about the limited game. Get you ready for your pre-release and the drafts that follow. If you enjoy our content, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Big time! Go time! Let's go! First up, let's take a look at the combat tricks. I always like to look at combat tricks so I know what to play around, especially in the limited environment. They act as both removal and a way for you to sneak extra damage through. First card we're going to look at, and possibly the best combat trick of today, is Adamant Will. It's 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a white for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gets indestructible until end of turn. This is a great way to save your creature and potentially take out another creature in the process. Also, it protects it from a lot of the removal in the set. And it plays very well with Yargle, Glutton of Urborg. This is a card that was previewed yesterday. It's 5 CMC, 4 colorless, and a black for a 9/3 legendary Frog Spirit. And of course, this is a very fragile but very potentially damaging creature. If you give this thing flying, if you give it trample, if you give it indestructible, even giving it first strike, suddenly this card becomes very damaging. So keep this card in mind when we look at possible pants, possible combat tricks, and other ways to enhance this creature, because the amount of damage you can get through by making him evasive or just making it so that he doesn't die in combat is prolific. Next up, we have Healing Grace. It's 1 white mana for an instant. Prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn by a source of your choice. You gain 3 life. So typically, I don't like these cards. They just gain you life. In this circumstance, it can be situationally good enough to play in limited, especially say sealed. As a combat trick, you attack in, force your opponent to make what seems to be a favorable trade, but then save your creature and take out your opponent's. Very situational. I typically wouldn't run this card. Charge is 1 white mana for an instant. Creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Obviously, this combat trick does very little in most circumstances. This is best in a go wide strategy where your opponent's already chosen his blockers, thinks he has the best options laid out, and then you're managed to slightly overcome very even matchups. This will go very well. There's sort of a Selesnya go wide strategy with saprolings and white weenie creatures. And this is going to be particularly strong in that strategy. Rescue is 1 blue mana for an instant. Return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. Just a great way to protect your creatures and get incidental value, getting additional enter the combat effects. It's just like the name says. It's actually very appropriately named because what this is best used for is protecting the creatures that your opponent is threatening. Befuddle is 3 CMC, 2 colorless and blue for an instant. Target creature gets -4/-0 until end of turn. Draw a card. So this is a way for you to blunt a creature's attack, make it so that it's ineffective in combat, maybe avoid an even trade, and it replaces itself. But one of the neat synergies of this card in this format is when your opponent uses Evra's ability to switch its power with their life total, if you befuddle Evra in response, they instantly lose the game. Blessing of Belzenlock is 1 black mana for an instant. Target creature gets +2/+1 until end of turn. If it's legendary, it also gains a lifelink until end of turn. So this is actually pretty neat. Getting +2/+1 isn't bad at all. And if it's legendary, you gain lifelink for potentially very big life swing. Fungal Infection is 1 black mana for an instant. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So there's going to be a sapling tribal sub-theme in Limited here. And this obviously is going to do well in there, but it's also just a generally good card. You can use it as a combat trick to change the complexion of what would be even trades. You can use it as a removal spell against small creatures, and you get the additional value of getting a permanent +1/+1 creature no matter what strategy you're running. So overall, it's just a very versatile card and very good. If you could pick this up early in a pack, I think it'll do work for you. Fervent Strike is 1 red mana for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike and haste until end of turn. Very cool in the fact that it only costs 1 red mana, and first strike is going to be super important in this format. In fact, one of my favorite combat tricks is Warlord's Fury is 1 red mana for a sorcery. Creatures you control gain first strike until end of turn, and you draw a card. Now, this isn't necessarily something you could flash into play mid-combat, but it does completely change the complexion of the board, and it replaces itself for only 1 red mana. You can potentially just cycle this, even if you don't have anything on your board. And the reason why First Strike is so important in this format is Rat Colony. Rat Colony is something you will see someone try to draft into this. It's 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a black for a 2/1 rat. It gets +1/+0 for each other rat you control. A deck can have any number of cards named Rat Colony. So this thing gets really nuts really fast, and you'll probably see people running around with a lot of 5/1, 6/1 rat armies. And that's actually particularly effective if you have Tetsuko Umezawa Fugitive. It's 1 colorless and a blue for a 1/3 legendary human rogue. Creatures you control with power or toughness 1 or less can't be blocked. So the rats will grow with their power, but their toughness will remain 1, making them particularly vulnerable to first strike. And you'll see a lot of first strike in this format because of that. But Tetsuko makes it so that they're all unblockable, making her an absolute bomb. You could drop this guy in play when you already have a bunch of rats on the board and swing in for potentially game. Very, very cool card interaction in this set. Run Amok is possibly the most powerful combat trick in the format. It's 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a red. Instant target attacking creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. Very powerful. It can only be used on the attack, but getting a +3/+3 lets it punch way out of its weight class, and the trample makes it so that you can force through damage. Also particularly good with Yargle. Wild Onslaught is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and green for an instant. Put 1/+1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It has a kicker of 4 colorless. If the spell was kicked, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Very powerful in the kicker strategy, which we will see more of later in the video. Arbor Armament is 1 green for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That creature gains reach until end of turn. This is really cool, surprising your opponent with the ability to block their flying creature. They thought they could get it through unaccosted, and suddenly your biggest creature gets a little bit bigger and can swat it out of the sky. Gift of Growth is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a green for an instant with a kicker of 2 colorless. Untap target creature. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If that spell was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. Once again, allowing you to surprise your opponent with something you've already attacked with, they think isn't a factor in combat. You get to untap it and grow it. And not to sound like Wedge or anything, but look at that art. That's a horrifying deer coming at you, just erupting out of the forest. Very cool. And of course, what's a draft format without removal? Gideon's Reproach is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a white. For an instant, it deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Something to keep in mind when going into combat. You could even do this. You could even do this for creatures that are already in combat to finish them off once damage has been applied. This is going to be very potent removal in the limited environment. Invoke the Divine is 3 CMC, 2 colorless and white. For an instant, destroy target artifact or enchantment. You gain 4 life. There's a lot of artifacts in this set, and more importantly, there's a lot of sagas that you don't want them to get to their 3rd lore counter. Typically, in previous formats, you probably see this as a sideboard card, but with the prevalence of both those card types in this set, I would think that you'd want to run this main deck and get a lot of value off of it. Blink of an Eye is 2 CMC, 1 colorless and a blue. For an instant with a kicker of 1 colorless and a blue. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If the spell was kicked, draw a card. So it's Into the Royal being reprinted. It's a good tempo play, once again allowing you to change the complexion of the board at instant speed. And if you have enough mana available, it even replaces itself. So it's a solid card. Deep Freeze is 3 CMC, 2 colorless and a blue. For an enchantment aura. Enchant creature because has base power and toughness of 0/4, has defender, loses all other abilities, and is a blue wall in addition to its other colors and types. So this is a pacifism on crack, and it particularly interacts well with a card that was recently reprinted. Juggernaut is 4 mana for a 5/3 that attacks each combat if able, and it can't be blocked by walls. So this effectively removes it entirely from the board when you're in context of attacking in with your Juggernaut. And that's pretty cool. Neat little card interaction there. Eviscerate is 4 CMC, 3 colorless and a black. For a sorcery, destroy target creature. Straight up, no muss, no fuss, at common, just destroy a creature. Very cool. Shivan Fire is 1 red mana for an instant. It also has a kicker of 4 colorless mana. It deals 2 damage to target creature. If the spell is kicked, it deals 4 damage to that creature instead. So it's most valuable without being kicked. It kills a small creature, it shocks it. And that's also really good. You can play this in combat or even after combat once blockers have been assigned to finish something bigger off. Or if the game runs late and you happen to have enough mana held up, you can just nick something off the board for 4 damage. And at instant speed. That cannot underscore how important that is. Fiery Intervention is 5 CMC, 4 colorless, and a black. For a sorcery, choose 1. It deals 5 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. So this is like a worse of Brave. But at the same time, in limited, I'm okay with that. Having this in limited is going to be very good. This will nix almost every creature off the board or destroy artifacts, and there's going to be a lot of them in this format. Very versatile, very strong, first pickable in some packs. Goblin Barrage is 4 CMC, 3 colorless and a red. For a sorcery that has a kicker cost of sacrifice an artifact or goblin. Goblin Barrage deals 4 damage to target creature. If a spell was kicked, it deals 4 damage to target player or planeswalker as well. So, Goblin Grenade, this is not, right? This is not the same thing, not nearly as economical. What it is solid removal, 4 damage for 4 mana, that can also burn out an opponent or just nix a planeswalker off the board. I don't think planeswalkers are going to be such a huge threat in this format. There's only 3 of them, and they're all going to be mythics. Don't get me wrong, you definitely want to get rid of them if you see them. But this is definitely something that you'd want to, more often than not, target your opponent and finish them off. Now, there's not as many goblins as I would have hoped in this set, now that we've seen the full set. So I don't think goblins are going to get there in standard, but keep an eye out. Core set is coming out this summer, and goblin's such a classic creature type, they may just make goblin tribal a thing next meta. Radiating Lightning is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and a red. For an instant, it deals 3 damage to target player and 1 damage to each creature that player controls. Bye-bye, Saprolings! It's always good to burn your opponent for damage, especially there's going to be some very aggressive strategies in this format with red. This could potentially finish off your opponent. And like I said before, there's a ton of tokens in this format, whether it be soldier tokens, whether it be saprolings, just being able to nix them off the board, nix the goblins, nix the mana dorks, that makes this potentially a very powerful removal spell. Fight with Fire is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a red for a sorcery with a kicker of 5 colorless and a red. Fight with Fire deals 5 damage to target creature. Right there, it's a decent card in limited, because we've been very happy playing Bombardment, which is 3 CMC for an instant that deals 4 damage to target creature. This is 3 CMC for a sorcery that deals 5 damage. So it's still very solid removal and limited. But if this spell is kicked, it deals 10 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets instead, allowing you to hit either multiple creatures or potentially just torch an opponent off the board. Also plays very well with the Gruul kicker strategy. So Urza's Rage, this is not. It won't see play outside of limited. But in that Gruul strategy, or even outside of it, this is a very powerful removal card that could be turned into a finisher late game. Fire Fist Adept is 5 CMC, 4 colorless, and a red for a 3/3 human wizard. When it enters the battlefield, he deals X damage to target creature an opponent controls, where X is the number of wizards you control. So that will always be a minimum of 1. So right out the gate, this is a 2-for-1 option. You play it, it torches an opponent's creature that's typically going to be smaller and build your board state all at once. And it's obviously more powerful in the Wizards Tribal Spells Matter build. So this is just a generally good value card. It's worth running in most red strategies, but if you are able to draft Wizard Tribal, this becomes very, very powerful. Haphazard Bombardment is basically an unset card that somehow made it into Dominaria. It's 6 CMC, 5 colorless, and a red for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, choose 4 non-enchantment permanents you don't control and put an aim counter on each of them. At the beginning of your end step, if 2 or more permanents you don't control have an aim counter on them, destroy one of those permanents at random. Probably the best thing to do with this is pick your opponent's lands, unless they have like some big beastie creature or planeswalker on the board. But more often than not, you're probably just going to drop this, pick your opponent's lands, and torch them. It is interesting that it's not enchantment, so it protects sagas, but otherwise it's too random to really be first pickable. Maybe in sealed, you might run this if you're deep in red. Beyond that, it's probably not worth playing at all. Just too random. Broken Bond is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a green for a sorcery. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So this is actually kind of neat. It's a cross between Naturalize and Explore. And this is very powerful. There is a landfall matter strategy in Simic colors and limited in this format. And on top of that, there's so much artifacts and enchantments and sagas that you don't want to see go off that this may be worth main decking rather than sideboarding. A very powerful card for this limited format. Ancient Animus is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a green for an instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control if it's legendary. Then it fights target creature in opponent controls. So it's Savage Stomp for legendaries. One of the cool things about this is that there will be a legendary card in every single pack. So odds are you will have something that synergizes with this. But at worst, it's just a Pounce. And Pounce is playable in green no matter what. Very solid card. Very, very good if you happen to have the legendary support to go with it. Pierce the Sky is 2 CMC, 1 colorless and green for an instant. It deals 7 damage to target creature with flying. So we've seen these cards before. Typically they run Plummet. I love the art on this one. I love the flavor text. It's nice to see something a little bit different. At the same time, this is going to function basically the same way Plummet has in previous formats, where you bring it in out of your sideboard if there's a specific threat your opponent is running that you want to get rid of. And there's more toys for the Golgari Sapling strategy. Golgari Sapling strategy is looking to be very aristocrat style. Basically, the paragon for this strategy is Slimefoot the Stowaway, where you're just going to flood the board with sapling tokens and fungi, and you're going to sacrifice them, reanimate them, and just get general value off of the creatures you flooded the board with. Verdant Force is being reprinted. This is its new art. Obviously, an old school card from back in the day. It's 8 CMC, 5 colorless, green, green, green for a 7/7 elemental. At the beginning of each upkeep, that's your opponent's and your own, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So right there, if this survives a single turn cycle, you paid 8 for 9 power and toughness across 3 bodies. That's well above the vanilla test. Very powerful card, and it's a great creature to target with a reanimation effect. Works very well with Whisper Blood Liturgist, which is a card we looked at yesterday, generating you 2 creatures every single turn, so for you to sacrifice to Whisper and continue reanimating those big black monsters or those big green beasties out of your graveyards. And it's a great target for Whisper to bring into play initially. Very powerful. These two are going to be best friends. Spore Swarm is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and a green for an instant. Create 3 1/1 green sapling creature tokens. So you're going to be able to flood the board very quickly with saplings in this format. We also saw there's basically going to be dragon fodder for saplings with kicker. So there's gonna be at least 2 spells where you generate a lot of tokens off of a single card. And then we're gonna have sack outlets so that it becomes a full-on aristocrat strategy. An example is Thallid Omnivore. He's 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and a black for a 3/3 fungus. You can pay 1, sacrifice another creature, and he gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If a sapling was sacrificed this way, you gain 2 life. So you're attacking in with a 5/5. He's a sack outlet, and you're getting incidental life gain. All of which is very, very good. Thallid Soothsayer is 4 CMC, 3 colorless and black for a 2/3 fungus. You can pay 2, sack a creature, draw a card. I like card advantage. Yavimaya Sapherd. Notice it's not Shepherd, it's Sapherd. It's kind of clever. 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a green for a 2/2 fungus. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. We basically saw the same thing with Merfolk and Rivals of Ixalan. We already know that there is a sapling / fungus lord at uncommon in this set, and it'll have basically the same interaction with this, where this becomes a turn 3, 5 power and toughness across 2 bodies. Great value here. Deathbloom Thallid is 3 CMC, 2 colorless and a black for a 3/2 fungus. When it dies, create a 1/1 green sapperling creature token. Typically, I don't like 3/2s for 3. They trade down with bears most of the time. This at least has the ability to get that additional value by replacing itself on the board. Basically, it's a doomed fungus, right? And that's particularly good in an aristocrat strategy. So I really like this card for that strategy, especially in limited. Fungal Plots is 2 CMC, 1 colorless and a green enchantment. You can pay 1 colorless and a green, exile a creature card from your graveyard, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token, just allowing you to get more and more and more value off of these creatures that you're going to put into play, you're going to kill, and then you're going to exile and generate bodies each individually time. And then at any time you can sacrifice 2 saplings for free, gain 2 life, and draw a card. That's very powerful, especially in an aristocrat strategy. Being able to sacrifice them at instant speed and get the without paying any mana and get the incidental value of 2 life and draw a card. That's very powerful. I'm really liking this strategy in limited. Pants! So there's a Boros strategy that's basically centered around powerful auras and equipments. Cards like Danitha will make the equipment more cost effective. And of course, the more you grow Danitha, the more ridiculous and out of control she becomes. And Balduck rewards you by allowing you to go wide with elementals based on how much equipment you run in your deck. Another great payoff is Champion of the Flame. He's 2 CMC, 1 colorless and a red for a 1/1 human warrior with trample. Why does the 1/1 have trample? Well, he gets +2/+2 for each aura and enchantment attached to him. We've seen cards like this before. There was a goblin card in Scars of Mirrodin, and I'm gonna kick myself for not remembering its name later. But I think it was Pile Driver. I'll have to look it up. They're super powerful and limited. If you can pick up enough equipment and auras to make this guy worthwhile, then he's going to go nuts for you and get a ton of value very quickly. Frenzied Rage, which is 2 CMC, 1 colorless and a red, enchant aura, enchanted creature gets +2/+1 and has menace. If you attach it to that guy before, you'll wind up having a 5/4 trample menace attacking in on turn 3. That's a lot of value. Outside of that situation, I probably wouldn't run this just for fear of being 2 for 1. Shield of the Realm is 2 colorless mana for an artifact equipment, equip cost of 1. If a source would deal damage to equipped creature, prevent 2 of that damage. Also, just really powerful to attach to him, making him even more durable in combats. Short Sword is Machete's back. It's 1 colorless mana for an artifact equipment, equip cost of 1. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Never underestimate the power of this type of equipment. Being able to always have a creature that's just a little bit more powerful than your opponent and move this around from creature to creature, both attacking and then in your main phase after attacking, so that you have a solid blocker going into your opponent's turn, is very, very powerful and limited. Jousting Lance is 2 CMC, 2 colorless artifact equipment, equip cost 3, equipped creature gets +2/+0, and as long as it's your turn, equipped creature has first strike. So on offense, this is a very powerful card, and it synergizes very well, not only with the first strike strategy, first strike value that you're going to see in this set, but it complements Knights very well. And I'll show you why, because Knight Tribal is super powerful in this format. Knight Tribal is going to be a thing. It's going to be black and white. A perfect example is Ariel will take advantage of all the Knights in this format and really make the most out of them. One of the key Knight cards will be Call to the Cavalry. It's 4 CMC, 3 colorless and a white for a sorcery. Create 2/2 white creature tokens with vigilance. And Dub can turn any creature you have into a knight. It's 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a white for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2, has first strike once again, and is a knight in addition to its other types. It's so important because for knights in particular, there is a legendary creature. We took a look at them yesterday that turns all their first strike into double strike, which makes them offensive powerhouses. Knight of New Benalia is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a white for 3/1 human knight. Typically, I don't like 3/1s. They trade down. But in this strategy where there's so much first strike, this becomes very powerful very quickly. Will synergize very well in that strategy. And there's going to be a lot of historic synergies, specifically in white blue. Wrath is a perfect example, being able to flash into play your historic spells. A very cool historic payoff is Artificer's Assistant. It's 1 blue mana for a 1/1 flyer. Remember when Flying Man was a super expensive card? This is the same thing, and whenever you cast a historic spell, you get to scry 1. That's a lot of incidental value as long as this guy stays on the board, and he's just going to ping away at your opponent. Call him a 1 mana Lava Axe because he's going to deal at least 5 damage over the course of the game and probably won't get blocked the whole time. This guy's going right into Edric's Spymaster of Trust and EDH as well. Just there's no reason not to put this card in there. The Aviant Trapper is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a white for a 3/2 human archer. Whenever you cast a historic spell, tap target creature and opponent controls. So this is a great payoff for your historic matters strategy, because this basically makes it so that you can tap down your opponent's best blockers every single turn. Makes the deck very aggressive. Daring Archaeologist is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and a white for a 3/3 human artificer. When Daring Archaeologist enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. Whenever you cast a historic spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Daring Archaeologist. So it's a little underwhelming playing a 3/3 for 4 mana. Fair enough. But you're going to get an artifact card from your graveyard back to your hand. Not as good as putting it back into play directly, but that specifically synergizes with the second ability, because when you cast that artifact spell, he suddenly becomes a 4/4, and you get the additional value of being able to use that artifact again. So this is actually a pretty powerful card limited, and the fact that it can continue growing as you play legends, artifacts, etc., makes it so that this guy can get out of hand really fast. Diligent Excavator is 2 CMC, 1 colorless and blue for a 1/3 human artificer. Whenever you cast a historic spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Now this one puzzles me a little bit because it's a historic trigger, but white-blue uses its graveyard the least of all the other blue color combinations. We've already established that Mill is not viable with the presence of Gaia's Blessing as an uncommon. So it's not a reliable kill condition. Typically, you want to use mill cards to populate your graveyard for graveyard matters strategies. Reanimation with black, land interactions in green, instant sorcery interactions with red. So with white, you can potentially bring back artifacts from your graveyard, but typically it's going to do more harm than good. So typically I would run this more so in other strategies and just get the incidental value whenever I have an artifact or I play a legend of that strategy. Relic Runner is 2 CMC, 1 colorless and a blue for a 2/1 human rogue. it can't be blocked if you cast a historic spell this turn, just making this deck even more aggressive. You drop this thing on turn 2, and you're going to push through even more damage every time you cast an artifact or a legendary for this strategy. Excavation Elephant is 5 CMC, 4 colorless and a white for a 3/5 elephant with a kicker cost of 1 colorless and a white. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So nice incidental value. It's fine for filling your curve. Probably going to see most play in sealed than anything, but it also has the ability for you to get that additional value of bringing back an artifact card from your graveyard and then get a historic trigger on its cast. Sanctum Spirit is 4 CMC, 3 colorless and a white for a 3/2 spirit with lifelink. You could discard a historic card from your hand, and it gains indestructible until end of turn. So typically, I don't like 3/2 creatures for 3, let alone 4. I like this one more because it has the ability to gain indestructible, which is very powerful. Typically, players will play around that as though it already has indestructible. It also protects it from a lot of potential removal. And the lifelink this grants you allows for consistent life swings, even when it's not getting through for damage. So overall, I think this is actually a pretty powerful card. I would definitely run it if I have enough artifacts to make this worthwhile. Sentinel of the Pearl Trident is 5 CMC, 4 colorless, and a blue for a 3/3 Merfolk Soldier with Flash. Very important, Flash in Limited. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target historic permanent you control. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So obviously we know the value of flickering cards, getting the additional benefit of their enter the battlefield effect another time, or just protecting it from potential removal. It's also good to flash this guy in as a surprise blocker, throwing off combat math, and potentially acting as a removal spell as well. Overall, I like this guy. He's a lot of value. Curator's Ward is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a blue for an enchantment aura. This is an enchant permanent, and that permanent gains hexproof. When it leaves the battlefield, if it was historic, draw 2 cards. So this really offsets the fear of playing auras, because typically when you play an aura, you're worried about getting 2 for 1. This will replace both the card that leaves the battlefield and the Curator's Ward in your hand if that should happen. But it also makes it less likely that it happens because it gives it hexproof, which is the best kind of defense you can get. Sparring Construct is a 1 colorless mana, 1/1 artifact creature construct, and when it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This is a great historic enabler for your decks. It's super cheap at only 1 colorless mana. It's a 1/1 with upside, so it generates board presence, while at the same time, when it eventually dies, you get the additional value of leaving a +1/+1 counter and enhancing the creatures that are still on the board. This is very powerful, and I think it'll be great in historic matters strategies. Aether Glider is 3 colorless mana for a 2/1 artifact creature bird construct. It has flying and it can't block. So this is actually a fine card. Getting a 2/1 flyer for 3 mana, you can push through damage with just how evasive it is. The fact that it can't block is fine. The problem is it will very quickly be outclassed. But if you're in a strategy where you're getting historic triggers, this is not only an aggressive play, but it'll trigger all your historic cards that are already on the battlefield. So it's very versatile and works very well in that strategy. Amaranthine Wall is 4 colorless mana for a 0/6 artifact creature wall with Defender. You can pay 2 colorless mana and it gains indestructible until end of turn. So this is a very powerful card for slowing the game down. You could play this for 4 mana get it out early, and stop most 4, 5, even 6 drops in this format. And then for an additional 2 mana, you can make it so that it's is protected from most removal, and on top of that, it can continue being a big fat blocker well into the late game. Very powerful, and not to mention, because it's an artifact, you can get your historic triggers. Pardic Wanderer is 6 colorless mana for a 5/5 artifact creature golem that has trample. So this is actually not bad, especially in Historic Matters decks. You're getting a sizable body that can trample through. This will be especially good in Sealed, where you won't have access to as many big fat bombs for your strategy. But this synergizes well in that deck and will do work for you. Voltaic Servant is 2 colorless mana for 1/3 artifact creature construct. At the beginning of your end step, untap target artifact. So there's potentially a lot of value to be had here with, say, your Gilded Lotus, with cards like Traxus, Scourge of the Krug. Being able to untap him at the end of every turn is very powerful, allowing him to attack in and still be held up as a blocker on your opponent's next turn. Very great synergy right there. Tragic Poet is 1 white mana for a 1/1 human. You can tap it and stack it to return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand, just getting you additional uses off of your sagas. Very powerful. Also, not in the right color scheme, but plays very well with sagas, is Keldon Warcaller. It's 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a red for a 2/2 human warrior. Whenever it attacks, put a lore counter on target saga you control, allowing you to just really push the value of those sagas, going from 1 to 2, or even triggering their 3rd lore counter even faster. Really speeds up the clock on those sagas. Very powerful. Wizard spells decks are going to be very powerful and limited as well. They're going to be red, blue. Adeliz the Cinderwind is a perfect example of how these decks want to run. You get cheap wizards out early, build up your board, but then play tons of instants and sorceries to gain additional value. A key piece to that puzzle will be Gitu Lava Runner. It's 1 red mana for a 1/2 human wizard. As long as there are 2 or more instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard, it gets +1, +0, and has haste. So the haste part is nice if you draw this late game, but what this guy's real impact is in that strategy, most of the effects are cost reduction if you have a wizard already on the field. This allows you to get one on the field turn 1, enabling all your other cards to be that much more cost effective. And for that reason alone, it's a key piece to the strategy. Sorcerer's Wand is 1 colorless mana for an artifact equipment with an equip cost of 3. Equipped creature has tap. This creature deals 1 damage to target player or planeswalker. If this creature is a wizard, it deals 2 damage to that player or planeswalker instead. So Harry Potter fans, rejoice! You're getting wands for your wizard deck! That said, funniness aside, this is actually pretty good, allowing you to get your wizards in play early, and then once their effects are no longer making an impact on the board, you can turn them into a repeatable shock on a stick, which is very, very good for this strategy. Precognition Field is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and a blue for an enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery card. You can pay 3 colorless mana, exile the top card of your library. So this is kind of like a future sight, only it's very, very specific for instants or sorceries. Still very powerful in that limited format. It also gives you the added ability to not have to reveal to your opponent unless you choose to cast the card. you can hold up mana and bluff your opponent, making them think that you have an instant to play or a counter spell, which is also very powerful. They'll have to play around it. And on top of all that, you can thin your deck very quickly with any extra mana you have. So it's a very good card in limited. I don't know if it'll see any use outside of that, but it's definitely a very good card in limited. Medallion Archivist is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a blue for a 1/3 Merfolk Wizard. You can tap it to add 1 colorless mana. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. So there's a mana dork in blue, but specifically for this strategy. It's fine. It does its job. There's nothing wrong with it. And it's a decent blocker on top of that. So I like this card a lot. Now, we got some additional cards for the Gruul Kicker strategy. Of course, that centers around cards like Halar, where they get value based off of you casting cards that have Kicker. Bloodstone Goblin is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Warrior. So right there, you've got a bear with no downside in red. Solid. Whenever you cast a spell, if it was kicked, it gets +1/+1 and gains menace until end of turn. So 2 mana that potentially can attack in as a 3/3 with menace every single turn. Sounds good. This is a solid piece for that strategy. Definitely better in draft than it is in sealed, but still going to see play no matter what in limited. Krosan Druid is also a great payoff for that strategy. It's 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a green for a 2/3 Centaur Druid. It has a kicker of 4 colorless and a green. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, you gain 10 life. Now that's a lot of mana for life gain, but this can fill out your curve, acting as a decent 3-drop, and late game, and if you're playing one of those more grindy games, especially in sealed, this can come into play and absolutely make it so that your opponent won't be able to fight his way back into the game. Just slam the door in their face. So in that regard, it's solid, especially if you've got cards that trigger upon casting Kicker. There's also a Simic Landfall strategy. Tatyova is a great card for that strategy, allowing you to turn your lands into life gain and card advantage. And of course, there's Multani, but it's a mythic. You won't see it in limited all that often. Grow from the Ashes is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. If this spell was kicked, instead search your library for 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, and shuffle your library. And I forgot to mention, it does have a kicker cost of 2 colorless mana. So, yes, it works well with the previous kicker strategy. It also works very well in the Landfall Matter strategy. So that's just good card design. It does good things in both. It allows you to splash maybe a 3rd color in your deck with very little downside. And on top of all that, the basic land card does not enter the battlefield tapped, offsetting some of the higher cost of this. I think this is a very, very solid inclusion, and we'll probably see Commander play as well. Sylvan Awakening is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a green for a sorcery. Until your next turn, all lands you control become 2/2 elemental creatures with reach, indestructible, and haste. They're still lands. This is even better when you use a mana dork to pay the mana for the spell, allowing you to attack in with all your indestructible lands that you put into play. And because they're indestructible, there's very little threat to them in limited. Outside of limited and constructed formats, you definitely don't want to cast this and have your opponent cast Settle the Wreckage. So probably not going to see play in standard, probably not going to see play in modern or EDH either. And just some general utility cards. Sergeant at Arms is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a white for a 2/3 human soldier. Fine curve filler. He also has a kicker of 2 colorless and a white. When he enters the battlefield, if he was kicked, create 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. So for 6 mana, you get 4/5 across 3 bodies. Not amazing, but still decent. It's a fine curve filler early and potential army in a can late game. Also plays very well with Shanna Sisay's Legacy and the uh, Selesnya Go Wide strategy. Also works very well with Charge and the White Devotion Anthem Knight. Cold Water Snapper is 6 CMC, 5 colorless and blue for a 4/5 turtle with hexproof. So probably not going to see play in draft at all. Looks cool. Look at that art. Man, I sound like Wedge today. But it's potentially an additional bomb for you to put in your deck in a sealed environment. You might even see these get some real use in your pre-release. Demonic Vigor is 1 black mana for an enchant aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and when it dies, return that card to its owner's hand. So I like this just for the fact that you don't have to worry about being 2 for 1. Yes, they'll kill 2 of your cards, but one of them goes back to your hand, and you have the ability to cast it again. And in the meantime, you do have advantage for only 1 black mana. So it's not as bad as most auras. Would I run this in most strategies? Probably not. But in, say, an aristocrat style strategy for Golgari, I could make definite use of this. Dark Bargain is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and a black for an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, and the other into your graveyard. Dark Bargain deals 2 damage to you. This is actually really super good for the reanimation strategies, allowing you to populate your graveyard and draw 2 cards on top of that. Very, very solid. Great card advantage, especially for its cost. Good card. Feral Abomination is 6 CMC, 5 colorless, and a black for a 5/5 creature throw with Death Touch. Just a big body, especially in sealed, say your pre-release. This thing will do work for you. If you need to fill out your 6-drop spot, this at common is a solid choice. Stronghold Confessor is 1 black mana for a 1/1 human cleric with menace. He also has a kicker cost of 3 colorless. If he was kicked, he enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters. So just right off the bat, he's 1 mana for a 1/1 with menace. Very aggressive. On top of that, if you kick him, he's 4 mana for a 3/3 with menace, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I can see this seeing play if you're trying to force Rakdos, especially. Soul Salvage is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a black for a sorcery. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. So it's fine. You see these every single set. Typically, I like them when they cost less, but in sealed especially, if you're running a lot of creatures and you know that they'll eventually get killed off, this can be card advantage for you, giving you additional gas late game. Windgrace Acolyte is 5 CMC, 4 colorless and a black for a 3/2 flying cat warrior. When he enters the battlefield, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard and you gain 3 life. So he's evasive damage dealer, way below curve, but the flying makes it feel a little bit better, and he populates your graveyard and gives you some incidental life gain. Not super powerful, but if you're looking to fill out your curve, you could definitely do worse. Rampaging Cyclops is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and red for 4/4 Cyclops. He gets -2/-0 as long as 2 or more creatures are blocking him. That's a problem in that it invites your opponents to double block him, and he often will trade down in those circumstances. You don't have the option of 2 for 1ing your opponent for gang blocking you. That hurts a lot. So he is on curve. He passes the vanilla test, but that drawback hurts a lot in limited. On the other hand, Keldon Raider is 4 CMC, 2 colorless red for a 4/3 human warrior. So that's pretty close to passing the vanilla test as is. And when he enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card, allowing you to pitch something that you don't need and potentially draw into more gas. This is solid, and I would definitely consider running this in the 4 spot, especially in sealed. Seismic Shift is 4 CMC, 3 colorless, and a red for a sorcery, destroy target land. Up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn. Now, this is a little bit more interesting than just reprinting Demolish, because this gives you the ability to destroy a land and mess with the combat math a little bit, allowing you to make it so 2 creatures can't block and pushing through more damage. This might actually be worth running in sealed just to finish opponents off in a really aggressive strategy. Corrosive Ooze is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a green for a 2/2 Ooze. Right there, we've got a bear with this upside. Whenever he blocks or becomes blocked by an equipped creature, destroy all equipment attached to that creature at the end of combat. So he's a bear that also destroys equipment. That's not bad. It's very specific removal, very interesting card design, and it's fine for filling out your curve in draft. This guy will definitely see play. Land of War Envoy is 3 CMC, 2 colorless, and a green for a 3/2 Elf Scout. You can pay 1 colorless and a green to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So he's a 3/2 for 3. I don't like 3/2s for 3. They trade down with bears. They get shocked off the board. They're typically not profitable. And on top of that, his ability does allow you some mana fixing, some additional flexibility, maybe for you to splash a 3rd color, especially in sealed. But it's super inefficient, costing you 2 mana to generate 1. Mammoth Spider is 5 CMC, 4 colorless, and a green for a 3/5 creature spider with reach. Oh, Spider Tribal and EDH. I'm just kidding. This is curve filler and limited. That's about it. Nature's Spiral is 2 CMC, 1 colorless, and a green for a sorcery. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. This is actually relevant in the fact that there's a ton of ways for you to populate your graveyard and basically turn it into an extension of your hand. So this card may just see play in your limited format. And Primordial Worm is 6 CMC, 4 colorless, green for a 7/6 worm. No abilities. I definitely miss Colossal Dreadmaw and his built-in trample here, but you pair this guy with any combat trick, he's going to be a very efficient 6-drop, especially at common. And that's it for today. Dominaria preview season is a wrap. If you enjoy our content, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Also, stay tuned throughout the week. We will be doing videos on all the limited archetypes. This has been Metagame Mastery. Peace!